Hello there, everyone, and welcome to Talk Together. This is one of our weekly shows where we get the chance to speak to some players and other TTRPG streamers within the community. Get to ask them some fun little questions, find out a bit more about them, find out where they come from, what they do, and all of that sort of stuff. I'm Josh, as some of you may or may not know, and I shall be your host for this evening. As you can see, though, I am not alone. I have the great pleasure to be joined by one of our fantastic stream team members, who I will let introduce themselves. Hello.
Hello there. My name's Owen. I am the Dungeon Master of the Lost Archives Twitch stream and YouTube channel and podcast channel. And I'm a fairly new member of the Roll Together community, but it is an awesome collection of just truly incredible, wonderful, creative people. And it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Before
we continue, we have some amazing sponsors that we have to thank. Dot the I's and cross the T's, as it were. Our sponsors, are Hero Forge, Ultra Pro, Phoenix Dice, and Alchemy RPG. And we also have some fantastic supporters in Idle Champions, Neverwinter, Elderwood Academy, and D&D Beyond. We also have a great audience known as the D20 Club. If you'd like to become one of these lovely people, go to our Patreon, which will appear in the chat, and sign up for as little as one of your local currency. And if you can't join us live, you can always listen to us on your favourite podcast providing app or YouTube just by searching Roll Together RPG, and you can find us on most social medias. There's a lot of them now floating around. We're trying to get to as many of them as we can. But you know,
they keep multiplying. It's hard to keep up sometimes.
And two more take its place. But anyway, you can find us or try to find us at Roll Together RPG. Now, this is Talk Together, so it's a little bit different to Talking as a Free Action, which is our other show that we do on Fridays. But what we're going to do today, so everybody's aware, is we're going to ask some questions, and the way that we're going to determine these questions is by the roll of a D20. Now, I'm very naughty today, and I don't actually have any physical D20s to hand because I've recently had an in-person game. So I'm going to be using the virtual D20. Don't moan at me. I apologize.
This is not what I was promised, and you will be hearing from my legal team, which is also just me.
From you. Okay. Yes, but.
Look, it's also very hypocritical of me to say that because we now always use virtual dice for our games. So I've come in strong, but I've now had to backpedal quite a bit, back off that statement and be like, yeah, that's fine, that sounds good.
So I'm going to be using the virtual D20. Not good for my first outing in Talk Together, but it is what it is. But when we do roll that D20, we normally say the words, roll that dice. You don't have to say it if you don't want to, but, you know, it's a little bit of pizzazz to the roll.
No, let's do it. I'm in. Let's go.
And if this stream will last for about 60 minutes, give or take, depending on if we decide to go on a tangent. I say we roll questions. Sometimes there will be questions that I will just outright ask you because I want to know things about things like this first question that I'm going to ask you, and which is going to be, what streams do you do, and on what days do you do them?
That's a good question. We do 3 streams at the moment on a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night, all at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. On Monday nights, we run a Curse of Strahd campaign, the 5th edition horror campaign published by Wizards of the Coast. It's a lot of fun. We've made a few changes to sort of fit it into a homebrew world. Most of my D&D games take place in a homebrew world that I've created, which has now started to grow so big I need a wiki to keep track of it. Luckily, someone created us a wiki not that long ago, so I've just been adding to that whenever I think of it. It's been very, very handy. On Tuesday nights, we play Avatar Legends, which is the Avatar The Last Airbender TTRPG published by Magpie Games. It's really, really fun. It's based on Powered by the Apocalypse, if you've played any systems by Powered by the Apocalypse, so very roleplay heavy. Not as much rolling as you do in D&D. A lot of things like actions can kind of trigger other actions rather than necessarily rolling for them. And the weirdest thing for me, right, is the Dungeon Master never rolls dice, which is such an unusual thing that I'm still getting used to 50 episodes in, apparently. And then our final Wednesday night session is a fully homebrew campaign called Return of the Giants, which is a 5th edition campaign that's completely original for the Lost Archives that we've been working on and writing since we finished up our Tyranny of Dragons campaign about 6 months ago. So it's been a lot of fun, and it's actually a direct sequel to the Tyranny of Dragons campaign. So all the previous player characters are in that world as NPCs now, and the player characters have taken on new characters who are working for the previous PCs, which is really fun.
I take it that you're going to be an instant purchaser or somewhat of the new, is it Big B's Hand of Giants or something?
Glory of the Giants. The chances are just insane. So we got to our like 4th episode, and I decided it was a fully giant themed campaign. It's all about giants that have vanished from the world suddenly coming back again. And then D&D Beyond are like, yeah, so we've got a new module coming out. It's going to be called Glory of the Giants. I'm just sitting there like, wow, that was quite fortuitous. So yes, actually, we're definitely going to be using that. And I've given the players a mechanic in the game that when that comes out, if they wanted to change their classes or change their subclasses or things like that, there's ways that they're going to be able to do that within the mechanics of the game in a role play way to try out the new stuff.
To seeing the changes that they've made to the giants that you find in the monster manuals and all the other and the compendium at the moment, but also the new stuff.
Yes,
especially if you go off of Fisby's Treasury of Dragons, where you've got like the Mind Flayer Dragon and Crystal Dragons and all of that. It's like, what sort of giants stuff are they going to put into this?
Yeah, there's so many things that they can do with it, because you can really pull from a lot of the different mythos in our world to help like build these monsters. So one of the things that's heavily inspired Return of the Giants is Norse mythology, which I'm a huge fan of. So I've sort of been building it based on Norse and Celtic and Welsh mythology, which all kind of intermingle from that Viking occupation of England way back in, I think it was like the 15th or 16th century. Don't quote me on that. So it's been really, really fun. So I've been having a lot of fun making like subtypes of giants. I reckon I'm going to be throwing them all out though when Glory of the Giants comes, and they've just done all of that work for me, which would be really cool.
So I was going to say something else, but I want to ask this one quickly because we're on the Wednesday stream at the minute. The giant part of the campaign, have you taken any influences from Storm King's Thunder at all, or is it all just completely homebrew?
Yeah, so actually, no, it was actually originally going to be a Storm King's Thunder campaign, and then you may remember back about 6 months ago, Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro made some interesting choices regarding the OGL. Don't remember this, so we kind of in protest at that point were like, okay, we might not do any more published adventures. We're going to move over to homebrew, which was something I'd been planning to do anyway. I think I just needed that push, and that was a perfect excuse to go and do fully homebrew. So I moved away from Storm King's Thunder. There's definitely some influences because in Tyranny of Dragons, I'd been hinting at this next campaign for a while. And so like some of the character names I've had to change subtly so that for those who are coming from Tyranny of Dragons, it's not like just a completely different name. So like Sarissa, who's the giant princess in Storm King's Thunder, I've changed to Sin Mare in our campaign. So there's some echoes from when I was setting up the campaign in Tyranny of Dragons, because I like to kind of foreshadow things where I can and drop little hints about things to come. So there's definitely some like hidden inspirations, but as quickly as possible, I am moving away from Storm King's Thunder rapidly. And at this point, I think we're about sort of 10 or so episodes in. There's no plot similarities to Storm King's Thunder anymore. We've now gotten far enough away from that. I just needed to bridge the gap from Tyranny of Dragons.
I should also like to note to anybody who would like to see non-D&D streamed game that the Avatar Legends game on the Tuesday is complete chaotic fun. One of the standout moments for me when I was watching, one of the ones I watched was when you went into one. For anybody who doesn't know the series, there's a bit where they go to the Earth Kingdom and they go to a village that they thought was worshipping one of the previous avatars. Turns out they weren't. They were burning it, and the players were discussing burning the village down. And it was like, well, that's not in canon. It's like, yeah, but they have a couple of 100 years to rebuild it before the events of the actual TV show. And that was I just like that. It was like chaotic fun.
Oh, it's so fun, the Avatar game, because I'm a big fan of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and it's so our campaign's set during the period of time after Roku's death, but before Aang knows he's the Avatar and before he's been frozen in the ice. So we've got about, I think it's like 12 years of time to play with, because this is set 2 weeks after Roku's death or 3 weeks after Roku's death. And so we know that we've got 100 years to get things back in canon again as much as possible. So there's been a few things that have happened where we've probably stretched the limits of narrative creativity, but we're able to be like, well, yeah. So that village is a perfect example. Chin Village, which is one of my favorite episodes of Avatar: The Last Airbender, Avatar Day, where they're protesting the Avatar. Yeah, I mean, they did actually end up burning down part of the village deliberately, which is a horrifically evil act, which we still haven't really had much discussion about in the world. But yeah, I mean, part of the village in Chin Village in the actual present day when the show takes place, you can actually see has been replaced with stone around the outer sections, where some of the inner sections are still wood. And so it actually, weirdly enough, kind of makes sense that maybe at some point there was a fire and they had to replace the buildings with stone. So it actually ended up being probably what happened. Who's to say what happened?
Okay, we touched on those two campaigns. Last question will be to do with the Curse of Strahd campaign. What changes have you made to people might not have seen in another Curse of Strahd campaign? Because there's a lot of them around. So
Yeah. So the original Curse of Strahd module, the thing I really love about it is Strahd's confidence and arrogance, this idea that he's never been defeated. And in the module, it's kind of hinted that he's been doing this for some period of time. I'm pushing that even further in the future. He's been doing this for millennia, and even the act of corrupting heroes and breaking them is starting to lose any meaning to him. So this is now a Strahd who has the torture of his situation is started to set in, and he's realizing the futility of his actions. Everything he does, no matter what he does, will always result in the same outcomes. And so the Strahd in this campaign is a little bit more hands-off in the beginning, and it's given a chance for some of those NPCs, some of the other characters in his castle, like Rahadin, some of the other vampires, to kind of rise up and take a bit more of the center stage, rather than being just background characters who the players might interact with once or twice. And a lot of these characters have motivations. Some of the vampires want to take Strahd's place as ruler of Barovia. Rahadin wants his master to once again be his normal self and return him to his previous self. And I've also done a little bit with Strahd's brother Sergei, because in the original module, if anyone's familiar with it, Strahd kills his brother Sergei, and that's what turns him into a vampire. I always found Sergei a suspicious character, someone who comes in, is all perfect and good and has nothing wrong with them. I don't believe anyone is perfect and good. I'm a huge fan of people having flaws that are strengths at some point and then become flaws later on. So without spoiling too much, I've given Sergei a bit more of a role than just, Sergei died way back, and that's how Strahd became a vampire. So Sergei's still doing some things even today, and I've had a bit of fun with that. Yeah. So just kind of adjusting the dynamics and giving a chance for other characters in the story to have a bit more to do than just be there for the players to interact and then slay with holy water and a stake through the heart.
Instead of having them as an episode of the week villain, like you would have done in the noughties sort of TV shows like Buffy and all of that, they're more fleshed out and more sort of can take on their own arc of a story sort of thing, which sounds pretty cool.
I'm a big fan of Supernatural, and I kind of liked the way that some of those incredibly important figures in the mythos, like Crowley or Lucifer, are there again and again and again, and their relationship changes with the characters over time with Dean and Sam. And so I've kind of tried to capture some of that magic a little bit and use that as an inspiration, this idea that these incredibly old immortal beings interacting with mortals and how they might change, how that changes the dynamic, and also how it changes their motivations as well. So it's been really fun, actually. I've always loved Curse of Strahd as a module. I've never been able to run it before, so it's been great to run it. I'd played a few sessions with another DM before they then had to step back, and then that's what actually meant that I took over this campaign and started it again on the stream.
So with that all out of the way, I think we're going to roll our first D20. Roll some dice.
Roll some dice.
Roll that dice. That's an 11. So,
Roll some dice.
okay, right. Who is your favourite character? Now, I'm not gonna. I don't think we should like sort of narrow that down to like your players because that's like choosing favourites, unless you want to. But character you've played on a roster or an NPC that you've played.
Oh, it's a really good question. There's a few that I really have loved. Probably my favorite. I'm gonna be really cheeky. I'm gonna answer this with two answers. My favorite character that I've played and the favorite character that I've ever seen. The favorite character I've ever played was one that was actually created by a player. So in our Tyranny of Dragons campaign, Jared was playing as a bard warlock, and he wanted a warlock patron that was a little bit different to what's currently sort of available in the module. And I said, oh, great, I'm more than happy to do that. I love homebrew. So we worked on a character for his patron in the background. And then when this warlock patron first appeared, through the interactions the group had with this character, it kind of created him in the moment. He became this very different to what we'd originally kind of envisioned, but it fit him perfectly. So I'm talking, of course, of oh my goodness, I've just blanked on his name. How awkward is that? Of Varys Nightshade, who is an eldritch being, not really a god, not really a demon or a devil, but someone who kind of exists outside the world and manipulates things very carefully. A little bit inspired by the Dragon Prince, star-touched elf, who's the villain in Dragon Prince on Netflix. If you haven't watched Dragon Prince, also by the people who made Avatar.
As a rock, that's the one.
Aravos. Yeah, a little bit inspired by Aravos. This very charming, charismatic figure who clearly is up to something, but at the same time, when your goals align with his, then you kind of walk down the same pathway. And it's been wonderful because the players all decided they were not going to work with this person. And every time he offered them a deal, they always took it every time because he was just very convincing, and he'd offer something that they wanted, something they needed in the moment. And it was such a fun character to play. And I am looking forward to bringing him back for Return of the Giants because he ended up getting actually kind of what he wanted at the end of Tyranny of Dragons. So his stuff, we agreed he would still be doing his things in the background and he'd come back again for the next campaign. Definitely my favorite character to play. My favorite player character, I think, would have to be Lockie, which is Michael's Warforged artificer that he played in Tyranny of Dragons. And just my favorite so far. The reason being, Michael just throws himself into his characters in a way that is so entertaining, while at the same time works perfectly as part of the group roleplay. Like it doesn't steal from anyone else. It just fits in beautifully. And he kind of, the way he throws himself into the character roleplay encourages everyone around him to do the same. And often he'll do things with his character that end up like hurting his goals or meaning that he doesn't achieve what he wanted, but other people do. And especially with Lockie, he did that really well because Lockie was incredibly awkward, being a Warforged who'd been around for hundreds of years, been powered on, powered off at different times. And so kind of a bit out of time and out of touch. Lockie was incredibly awkward and so would say and do things in social situations that were like horrific. He'd share things that were meant to be completely secret. He'd ask questions that would reveal the group's goals, but then it would give other characters a chance to kind of step up and bring in and kind of move things around in terms of the narrative structure. It was really clever, and I really love the way Michael does that with Lockie. It's very entertaining, and it's empowering for the other characters. Sometimes I think really charismatic and really engaging characters can sometimes draw attention to them. Something about the way Michael plays Lockie actually brings everyone in with him, and everyone gets pulled up at the same time. It's wonderful to watch, and I really enjoy it.
It is always nice when you've got that one player, and I think everybody has it in every game. You have that one player that is the one that can help instigate role play between the others, whether it be through something silly or something more serious. There's a player in one of my IRL games that I played. His character is the most annoying character you'll ever meet, and he always puts his foot in it. always lands himself in trouble. Doesn't matter what situation we're in, he'll somehow manage to find a way to land himself in trouble, us in trouble. But we always sort of gravitate around that, and we're able to role play and ping off of it. So yeah, I fully get what it is. It is good.
Yeah, it's such a lovely thing, and yeah, I'm always appreciative to have those at the table. I think we're lucky enough to have almost everyone at different times doing that, which is so good to see, and so easy for me as a DM.
It's the best feeling in the world, where you can just, even on stream, where you can just give them something, they start role playing, you just go.
Yeah, my favorite bit is where you can see that they're immersed enough that the session goes by very quickly and it gets to the end. And as I'm sort of like trying to wrap up, they're pushing back in and trying to stop me wrapping up. That's in character. That's very fun. That's how I know I've got them.
Right. So let's roll another question. So we say the words, roll that dice.
Roll that dice. Roll that dice.
If you...
Ooh.
It's a success.
It's got to be a success.
It's a successful question. If you could make yourself in D&D, what would you be? I'll also add on to that, if you could choose another TTRPG system to make yourself in, which one?
Oh, that's a good question. It's funny you asked this question, because literally about a week ago, a group of friends and I were all saying, what would your stats be if you were a D&D character, like you as a person? And we were having a bit of fun. Like, what would be your primary stat? What would be your dump stat? Oh, look, I think everyone knows that I would probably be a bard. There's no doubt about that. I think a storyteller bard, maybe like a bard of lore, maybe a lore bard would probably be my thing. I love obscure trivia. I love to learn things. I am constantly coming up with hypotheses and questions. I'm a scientist by training, so questions and answers are such an integral part of how I see the world. So probably a lore bard would be appropriate. And I'm not too bad at the saxophone if push comes to shove, so could always do a bit of instrument, doot magic flute if I needed to. I think probably bard would be my D&D character. In terms of race, look, to be honest, any of them really. I don't think there's any one race in D&D. Maybe half elf probably would be the most appropriate. For other TTRPGs, I've not really played too many others. I've played a little bit of Pathfinder, a little bit of Call of Cthulhu. So probably the only other TTRPG I'm most familiar with would be Avatar, in which case I would love to be an airbender. That'd be so cool. Airbenders are the coolest by far. Like, as much as I love the water and I love like swimming and scuba diving, I think if I had to pick between being able to literally fly, yeah, no questions.
Mine would be waterbender, but I like that.
That's fair. What would be your D&D character if you were? What would be your class?
I mean, I just asked you the question. I didn't even think.
I see. I was prepared.
Prepare one for myself.
I was just lucky that we were having this chat as a group only like literally a week ago.
I don't actually know. I think I would be more of a artificer. I think I like to tinker with things.
I see that.
I like to do editing, like software, computer, like videos and all that sort of stuff. I also, you can't see because my background's blurred, but I have a whole shelf here full of like minis and things that I put together, like Warhammer and Marvel Crisis Protocol, Star Wars Shatterpoint, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, like a tinkerer, artificer.
My little, I'd probably be the artillerist one that can create little cannon thing, and the little cannon thing would be the minis and stuff. So I'd probably have like a space marine appear on my hand and just start shooting. Probably, I don't know, stuff like that. Yeah,
that'd be so cool. I reckon armorer might work as well, where like your armor's all integrated with different little things that pop out when you need them, and like your arm has a tool belt that you just sort of stretch out.
The funny thing about being
a 3D printer.
The funny thing about me being an artificer though is that I think intelligence would be my dump stat.
I don't think that's true from the conversations we've had. I don't think that's true at all.
Well, it'd definitely be one of my lowest at least.
I think mine would be wisdom. Unfortunately, I think wisdom would be my highest. I'm like book smart. I am not street smart at all. I make decisions that sane people would question.
I'm the opposite. I'm not very
frequently.
book smart, but I am very street smart and I'm very perceptive of things. So
Yeah, no, that's not me. It's not me at all. That's great though. It's good that we've got like in a party. It'd be a perfect party. We just need someone with like a good strength, and we're sorted. We're a great D&D party. We're ready to go.
Let's roll that dice to see if we can find it.
Yes.
Roll that dice.
Oh, roll that dice.
That's an 11. Roll, so
that
roll that again.
dice.
19.
Ooh.
Ooh. Ooh. This is a juicy one.
Ooh.
Now, you run 3 different streams at the moment. And one of them is a continuation of a previous stream that you've run. If you could go back and change an in-game decision, what would it be?
That's a good one. Oh man. I think probably the decision I would change is in Curse of Strahd. I had an opportunity to invite them to dinner with Strahd probably in about episode 5 or 6. And I thought, because originally I wanted them to meet Strahd very early on. And in the moment, I kind of second guessed myself and thought, oh, it's a bit too soon. People who know the module well are probably not going to like this change. Because normally, like in the module, Strahd invites them to dinner normally once they've completed a couple of tasks around Barovia and they draw his attention. Whereas I'd kind of been changing it so everyone who came through, Strahd knew the second they'd entered his realm. And he wanted to meet each new group coming through because why wait? What's a week to him when he's lived for millennia? What's 2 weeks for him? But I second guessed myself. And in the moment, I changed my mind and bailed on that idea. I regret doing that. I wish I had stuck to my guns on that. I think it would have been more interesting. As it is, I still have not found a place as appropriate as it was then to bring them into dinner with Strahd. So I do regret that because it would have been a really cool way to get Strahd on the table a lot earlier.
A lot of alliterations of Curse of Strahd where people not so much like watched them, but more like read how other people have done it and all of that sort of stuff. And there was one that I'd read where they had Strahd appear in the very first session within like the first 15 minutes. So he was there were some wolves that were tracking the party as they came through the mists, and then a hunter came through.
Yeah.
Who was actually in control of the wolves, and then the hunter revealed himself to be Strahd, sort of thing. And then
yeah, so the party have met Strahd like 5 times, but not as Strahd, always as another character. And that's I regret not taking advantage of that opportunity early when I originally had planned to. Wish I had. They figured out at least one of them. And then as a thing, they said, oh, how many times have we seen Strahd? I said, oh, why don't you guys guess a number and I'll make a face. And one of them said, I think they said like 4. And I was like, ooh. And now they've gone like, oh my God, who's Strahd? And so it's been great for the player characters not knowing.
So if any of your players are watching, you now know it's 5. You need to go back and have a look.
That's a good point. You're not allowed to watch this bit, and we'll edit that earlier.
Flip it around. Right, so
put that earlier. No, that's fine. They can know. It's only 1 extra. And my player characters, I have to say, for the most part, are really good at not metagaming. They mostly keep what they know as people away from what their character might know, which I'm very impressed with because it's hard sometimes.
Especially when it comes to creature stats and all that sort of thing. If you're a bit more knowledgeable of it.
Oh, yeah. I change stats.
One of the DMs I play with makes sure to change the stats because he knows that there's at least one other player at the table who will look things up in between sessions and look at the best way to beat creatures.
Oh, really? We'll actually look stuff up.
I don't understand why.
Wow. Yeah, that kind of takes some of the fun out of D&D. From my perspective, some of the fun is in the best possible way, fucking up. Like, part of the joy of D&D is when things don't go well. I mean, if you just won every time, a bit boring, really. It's much more fun to get things wrong and then have to like undo mistakes that you've made or try and fix something only to discover that you can't fix it. You've now got to work around it and come up with creative solutions for your own mistakes. I love that. That's one of my favorite parts of D&D.
At one point where we were looking to do some research into beholders because we needed to go hunt a beholder for an artifact and all that sort of stuff. And
Love
one of the
goals.
players, not the one who goes and does all the research, but one of the other players said, could I go to the library and pick up a monster guide or something? So the DM went, yes, you can. And this was
Perfect.
before we started using D&D Beyond. I think it was before D&D Beyond was actually, we've been playing this campaign for a while, so it was before D&D Beyond was as good as what it is now. And
yeah, because people forget, but it's not that long ago that D&D Beyond was a
you just
hot
couldn't do
mess.
anything on it. But the DM literally went, right, you walk into the into this library, you get given a book, and that book is, and he pulled out Volvo's Guide to Monsters, and he gave it to the player, and he said, you've got this book until the next session, and that's how long you get to read the book for, and then you have to give it back. So, and then that's it. He said, you're not allowed to write anything down. You've got to memorize as much as you can. And that information that player read through, he took it on instead of, memorizing every single thing that every single creature could do. Instead, he decided to flip through the entire book and look at all the creatures that are in the book, all the ones that weren't like vampires or basic common creatures, or all the more uncommon ones. So when they pop up, he's like, oh, yes, I know about that. And then he'll go do research again.
I've read about this in a book.
More in-depth research, and it was really good.
That's brilliant. That's such a good in-game way of actually giving information to the characters. And using Volos is great too, because Volo is an established character in the Forgotten Realms, and the book is kind of written from his perspective for the most part. That's brilliant. I'm a huge fan of that.
So, I keep saying so every time I'm going to say let's roll a dice.
What's better than
right?
Which I do all the time.
Maybe you should, sorry, very sorry to the podcast
try not to
for doing that. But let's roll another dice. Roll that dice.
Roll that dice.
Now, what do you like in a DM?
What do I like in a DM? I think my favorite DMs have been ones who really encourage roleplay and balance. I think for me as a player, I really like balancing D&D combat and roleplay probably at like a 60-40 in favor of roleplay. Because while I do enjoy the combat of D&D, I think mostly what I play it for is the roleplay aspects and the social side of things. I love the combat, but I think for me, probably such a bard answer, I think 60% I like a session where it's about sort of like 60% split between roleplay and combat. So I really love a DM who sort of does help push the roleplay. I've played in a few games where it's almost been like playing like a tabletop Warhammer. I love Warhammer, but I want to know going in that that's what I'm playing and not like sort of psych myself up for roleplay or things like that. And I think some DMs who just do the dungeon crawl style DM, I think like if I know that that's what it's going to be, then I'm so into it. But my favorite type of D&D is the one where it's roleplay, and especially roleplay between the player characters as well. And I really love DMs that encourage that. I think as well, the other thing I look for in a really good DM is that improvisational skill to roll with whatever the players are saying and immediately use that rather than the I think it's those classic drama improv skills, the yes and style approach of D&D. I really love when DMs do that because it really brings the players into the narrative. And when you use the players as the kind of focus of choice in the world, like this concept of where all characters in the world make choices and do actions, but the DM's in control of 99.999% of them. So the DM's going to make choices that suit their overall goal rather than what those characters' goals might be for the most part. Whereas players can only make choices for their character or for their group, for their party. But if you give the player choice a bit more weight than the DM choice, suddenly it's the players driving the narrative, and it sort of brings them into the world and helps them feel that their actions have consequences, and every action carries an equal weight of consequence. Even if that's not true, that starts to become the narrative in the mind. And then suddenly, like, you see players like really talking through with the party, what do we want to do here? Or making decisions that they might not otherwise make or not otherwise just like assume is going to be fine. You actually see them thinking through and working really hard as a team. I love that. That's so fun. And that was a lesson taught to me by one of the dungeon masters who first taught me to play D&D. Ben in Melbourne. Thank you very much. Was absolutely fantastic.
I like I like when the DM also integrates backstory into your characters.
Yes.
They ask you for a backstory, you give them a backstory, and then you find that backstory actually starts taking place. Perfect example is in a game, we were just having a conversation about some rebels who were fighting, and one of the names that the DM dropped was one of the names from one of my characters' backstories. And we were talking about it, and I'd sent him it like a year beforehand, and I just heard the name and I went, I recognise that name. And I looked at him and he was giving me the side eye, like, yeah, you've got that now. Yeah, and I'm like, you sneakies.
I love that. I try to do little character arcs within the campaigns for D&D and for Tune of Dragons that I run. So one of the things that we do is we deliberately don't, I get the players not to write a huge backstory, just a couple of key players in their lives previously, a couple of key events in their history. And then I actually try and explore those during the campaign where characters from their past come back, and then then on the spot improvising, we kind of role play and flesh out the backstory in the moment, because then the backstory kind of automatically fits into the narrative because the players have already got the narrative in their minds. They've been playing it for 12 sessions or so. And it's a really cheeky drama way of helping immediately immerse backstories into the currents without having to actually do a huge amount of work on my part. It's a bit cheeky, but it's one of the things I love to do, and have like maybe 4 or 5 episodes that focus on one character in particular, and then we move on to the next character, and try and keep this idea that each player and character in the narrative has a little arc, like how TV shows do.
I like to do the same as what you said, where that I do short-term goals, long-term goals, a rival or 2 rivals, general family, whether they're alive or dead or not, and then if I'm doing a more horror-based game, or which 9 times out of 10 I'm doing something that I'm planning to traumatize the players at some point, I'll ask for 3 fears.
Oh, brilliant!
And then I'll start, because I like to do dream sequences when they take long rests and all of that.
So, me too.
I'll incorporate that.
I love dream sequences; they're the best fun. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, the fears thing is great fun. I did that for Curse of Strahd because I've created a sanity table based on Call of Cthulhu, and so they have a sanity stat that they're constantly checking against, and it's an eroding stat that is very hard to build up, very easy to lose. So it's been quite fun actually. I think I have to revise the table though. The some of the short-term madnesses are just a wee bit more punishing than I intended initially.
There's a system. So Free League Publishing have just released Lord of the Rings for like a 5e supplement. And they have.
I saw that. It looks awesome.
Game over, or I played in a 4-parter with Guild Superior, who are also members of the stream team. And they have, it's obviously a low magic system because Lord of the Rings, but they have a system in it called Shadow.
Very low magic.
And it goes. The shadow, so your total shadow is based off of what your total wisdom is. And every time you see something, so similar to Call of Cthulhu, if you see something that's discombobulating or horrifying, something like that, then you need to roll a check. Yeah. Normally, from what we did in the game, it's normally either a wisdom or charisma saving throw, and you gain shadow points. If you get to half of what your wisdom score is, you basically get the equivalent of a 1 exhaustion point. So you get like negatives of disadvantages on ability checks and all that sort of stuff, and you're called miserable. When you get to 12, that's when things start to go really wrong. And if you go above 12, you hand your character sheet over, and that's it.
Yeah. Do you know what though? That sounds exactly like how Tolkien, if he was alive, would have intended it, right? Because the Lord of the Rings is meant to be a damning takedown of war and the dangers of war and over industry, and like this idea that ordinary people who are pushed into war are always damaged by it, and it's permanently scars everyone as part of it. I think he'd approve 100%. That sounds amazing.
The only way to recover shadow points, the main way is you have a home base sort of thing, which is whenever you rest at the home base, you always recover shadow. So you can't recover shadow just when you take a long rest out on the road. If anything, you could potentially gain more shadow points when you're out on the road if you have like a bad night's sleep or something. But there are other things that you could do, like eating a good meal while out on the road or something might recover a shadow point or something, but it's very, very sparse on the recovery. So I like that element. I've always liked the idea of having, when you play in an RPG, you have like a central location and then you work from there. The sort of games you get where you travel around the world are fun, and I do like seeing the worlds that people have created. But there's just something about having that one focal point, whether it be a town, a ship, a city,
100%.
or something like that, and then you get all of those NPCs that are within that area, and they get fleshed out as well. And then, in Lord of the Rings, because it was Bree in Lord of the Rings that we had as our home base. So when we stayed there,
yep, that makes sense.
We covered some shadow points. But yeah, that's a very good system.
I love that. I'm also a huge fan of the home base idea. For us, it's a guild hall, and they have an airship that is linked via teleportation circle. So they don't have access to it yet in the new campaign, but for Tyranny of Dragons, they used it all the time. So their airship, they had a helmsman for the airship that would be flying around, and then in between travel, rather than being on the airship while traveling, they'd often use the teleportation circle to go back to the city, back to their guild hall in the city, and explore and rest and recover there, while the poor old helmsman have to finish the journey with the crew.
No. Right, let's roll another dice. Roll another dice. And another one. Oh. Now, I've already said one of the moments from your stream, but for you, what is the funniest moment you've experienced in game?
Ooh, the funniest. I think I'm gonna have to give it to a moment from Avatar Legends. There was a scene where the group were in the Siwong Oasis, this oasis in the middle of the desert that you might remember from Avatar: The Last Airbender, that had a massive, almost like a massive like glacier in the center of town that was slowly evaporating in the heat. And the townsfolk lived, like, they got their water from this, the ice from this. Long story short, the players got into a little bit of trouble with the guards that were there, along with some Fire Nation soldiers that were traveling through the area and had to escape the town. And they decided to try and get out along with some NPCs that they'd been collecting. And so one of the players shoved another player into a wheelbarrow because they weren't running fast enough, and tried to run with them. And then airbend underneath that to get a bit of lift. What they succeeded in doing was crashing through the market stalls and out through the front gates, which gave me the perfect opportunity to throw the cabbage merchant.
I was going to say,
in that scenario,
is it a great grandfather? Yeah,
his great grandfather. Yeah, and just the idea where because like in the moment, I think they jumped in the wheelbarrow and they're running it, and one of the players he stops and goes, "How many wheels does it have?" I'm like, "Well, it's a wheelbarrow, not a wheels barrow. So just the singular wheel." Oh man, it was very funny.
Right.
Just the chaos that they come up with, like, oh, what if I airbend if I airbend underneath the wheelbarrow, it'll lighten it and make us go faster. I was like, so you just want like a big blast of air? It's like, yeah, just a blast of air underneath. It's like, okay, well then as you do that, this massive blast of air, you flip end over end and crash into the market stall. So like, oh, quick. Oh, what if we stole the top of the market stall and used it as like a parachute or a sail? Okay, yeah. Brilliant.
I'm going to roll.
Let's go. I think the thing I love most about the Avatar is that there's no thought apart from the first thought that they act upon. Like there's never any like, and I love this so much. Please never change if you're listening to this, players. There's no second or third like, oh, but that might happen, or there might be a consequence. No, it's I'm going to do this, and it's just chaos, and it's wonderful, and it matches the tone of the show sometimes too perfectly.
I love it. And I rolled another dice, and I got a 7. Is there a moment in a TTRPG that impacted your life out of the beginning?
That's a really good question. I think, yeah, the one that sort of comes to mind is this is funny because like one of the memes that I've seen about Dungeon Masters is that you're either a group therapist or you're the trauma that the group then have to experience later on. And when you were saying before about how you'd love to traumatize your players, in my mind I was like, yeah, it's so true, that meme. It's so appropriate, the idea that as a dungeon master, it's either group therapy or group trauma. Yeah, I think an early one for me, because unfortunately I don't get to be a player very often. The curse of the forever DM has well and truly sunk in now. But one of the earliest times, I think it's the second game I ever played D&D. We were heading through this. I think it was the Elemental Evil module, and we'd come in. Claire and I had come in at like level 10, and this is our second game ever playing D&D. The first game we'd come in, they'd captured us, and the rest of the group freed us, and that's how our characters were introduced to the party. And so the second ever, I was playing a level 10 Moon Druid, which is so good. And I think I'd like mucked up one of my spells and hadn't realized how they worked, and it had caused a lot of problems. And me as the player was feeling quite embarrassed, because like this is a group of well-established players who've been playing for years. I've come in after watching a bit of High Rollers, a bit of Critical Role, trying to give it a go, but not really knowing 100% what I'm doing. And there was a point where my character and myself were the same person at that point, kind of apologizing for fucking up, and it was in character, but it wasn't 100% in character. It was also me trying to like be like, I'm sorry guys. And one of the players who was playing this very gruff dwarf cleric, who was like quite brusque, a little bit unfriendly, a bit standoffish, came over. I was playing an elf at the time. He's like, kneel down, boy. I was like, oh, yeah, I kneel down. He's like, you did your best, and that's all that we could ask for. And that moment like made my character feel better and made me feel better. And then like from then on, this character kind of took me under his wing, and the player did as well. And it was sort of the intersection of fantasy and reality coming together. And it was just really encouraging. We'd like step in and offer advice in the moment, be like, that spell's fire, right? Like, yeah. He's like, not gonna work, try this. It was just really lovely. And as a new player to D&D, doing it in character and also doing it as part of the roleplay, but then still having the player kind of help out as well, was so encouraging. And that moment where he was like, kneel down, boy, come here, you did your best. That was what I needed to hear in the moment, and it was really lovely. So yeah, it was fantastic. Thank you, Sam. Again.
Yeah, that's nothing else really to say to that. There's lots of moments that people can have in any of the TTRPGs, but when you have that one moment where it sort of leaks over from roleplay into real world, that's where connections, especially when you come to a group of people that you didn't know to start off with, and then you become like firm friends after that.
Yeah, because we'd actually only interacted as characters, because when we'd arrived at the game shop, we sort of like, oh hey, I'm Owen, blah blah blah, like introducing ourselves, and then we'd started the session. And so Claire and I had found this walking past the game shop that had a sign up saying like, oh, D&D here, and she'd always wanted to try it, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I feel like confident enough. She's like, no, you got to come. And I wasn't feeling very confident that day, which is probably for those who watch the streamer going like, Owen, not confident? What are you talking about? There was a time, once upon a time, where I wasn't very confident with D&D, and and that was what I needed to hear in that moment, and it was so lovely and so appreciative. And so to all players out there, if you ever have new people at your table, if you can encourage the new players in character as well as out of character, I reckon you'll see huge results. huge results.
Right. Do you happen to have a D20 to hand?
I do have.
Would you like to roll for the last question then?
I would love to roll for the last question. Let's do it.
14.
That is a 14. Have we had a 14?
Yes,
I don't think we've had 14.
No, this is going to be the point where
we have. Okay, I'll roll again.
18. We haven't had 18.
18.
Oh, okay.
I haven't had 18.
I'm actually really interested. This is actually a very good question, and I am actually I really want to hear the answer for this. Who's the best villain you've ever faced in a game? Obviously, as you're more of a forever DM, who is the best villain you've ever given to the players?
That's such a good question. I think my favorite villain is actually not one that I've created, and it's not one that it's one that another DM created while I was playing in a campaign. It was a one shot that I was part of, and the villain of the campaign was this incredibly reasonable, incredibly like to give a bit of backstory. So it was set in a Eberron style campaign, and it was very heavy into like the idea of the Warforged kind of fighting for their rights, fighting to be no longer seen as tools but as actual like living beings. And so we were solving a murder mystery in the backdrop of that occurring. And when we finally discovered the murderer, all signs had been pointing very clearly towards this group of elves who were against the Warforged gaining rights. And it turns out it had actually been a Warforged, and they hadn't intended to kill the person. They hadn't understood how like living, breathing beings kind of function. And so they tried to repair them, seeing that they were injured. And it was so clever because the act was horrifying and the consequences were terrible. But at the same time, like you could really see how that had happened. And I just loved how real the villain felt, because they weren't a villain per se, but the effects of what they'd done and what they'd actually done was horrifying. But it was really good. It was really fun. And I just really enjoyed that. It felt so satisfying and so real that this very complicated campaign involving a lot of nuance and ethical dilemmas and conundrums kind of ended with the biggest one, which was, well, what do we do? If we turn this Warforged in, they're going to be destroyed and melted down. They're not going to be imprisoned. They're going to be destroyed for this. And it really conflicted the group. And we actually had a full split down the middle of the party, with one side who were like, yeah, we have to destroy this thing, it's malfunctioning. And the other side who were like, no, like we need to be different. We need to fix this. It was really fun. And I just loved that because it wasn't a big bad. It wasn't this all powerful lich or this vampire lord. It was just a Warforged worker, but their actions had caused so much strife throughout the city. And I really loved that. I just loved how this ordinary person had become so much larger because of a single action in the moment that they didn't even understand that they were doing.
What did happen in the end?
And
If the party was fully split, what ended up happening to the Warforged?
The group who decided to destroy it, we were trying, the group that had split, I was on the side of wanting to try and like find a more peaceful solution and try and see if we could figure out like what had happened and how the Warforged had become this way and whether other Warforged were affected, whereas the rest, like some of the party were like, no, we just need to destroy this. It ended up breaking into PC combat actually. And it was like all good fun. Like all of us were friends and we knew what we were doing. So it wasn't like a situation where it was a bit awkward or tense. It was actually all in good fun. And one of the other player characters, a sorcerer, ended up doing heat metal on the Warforged and ended up killing it.
Well,
yeah, and it was, but that's what I mean, right? Because all of us were so invested in the story as the characters, and so like, and it was very true to what the character had been doing the whole playthrough. So it was satisfying, but like at the same time, like satisfying for the story ending, and like the consequence being that because that Warforged was then killed, the Warforged riots turned violent, and suddenly all the Warforged were like moving onto the streets, and so it became this whole like massive consequence for the city. And I believe that DM still uses that world and runs one shots in it quite frequently, with that having been one of the historical moments that changed the city forever. So it's still very satisfying, but yeah, very, very sad as well. This idea that, well, kind of no one really wins. It's really tragic. It was just tragic from start to end, and that felt very poetic, and I really enjoyed that actually.
Right, well, on that, I think we have come towards the end of our time, and getting close to the 60-minute mark, I believe. If not, we've gone over it. The kobolds in the chat will tell us if we've gone over or not. We definitely won't be getting...
We're at 55 minutes exactly.
Awesome. We'll end it there then. I'd like to thank everybody who is here for joining us for Talk Together, and you can find us on Fridays at 6 p.m. EST, currently while we're still in the British summertime, for Talk Together, or our other show, Talking is a Free Action, which is where we take some of the players from the Roll Together universe, we pluck them out of the little campaigns that they're doing at the moment, and we throw them into a question maze where our question masters put them through questions and challenges to see how they tick and all of that. It's quite fun. My one is called The Playmaker, who's not too far removed from myself. But hey, and you can also find us on Mondays and Tuesdays for D&D at 6 p.m. BST as well. Mondays we are doing newer shows, so at the moment that would be Fracture, which is our long-running campaign, and I believe we have a new campaign with some familiar faces, not pointing at anybody, appearing at some point, probably the week after Fracture. I'm not 100% sure at the moment. And then Tuesdays we have the Kobolds have delved into the Roll Together archives to pick out some of the juiciest campaigns that we've done, and we are rerunning them. And some of them are from lockdown time. So if you want to see some of the players with their lockdown hair, come see us on Tuesdays. You can find all of our stuff at twitch.tv/RollTogetherRPG, which is where we are right now. The VODs are available immediately after the stream to catch up, or you can find all of the content on YouTube a few days later, as well as on any podcast app. Many thanks to our D20 Club. I always do this for the D20 Club, because, we love doing the hearts. I never like doing it like that. I always like having like the bit above. I don't know why. I just don't.
It's got to be held within the eye of truth, the Illuminati eye of truth, right? You got to have the.
If you'd like to join Patreon, as I said before, you can by searching Roll Together RPG on Patreon, and you can do so for as little as one of your local currency. And again, a massive thank you to all of our sponsors and supporters.
Remember, joining the D20 Club means that you are more likely to roll a natural 20 in your campaign.
This is no. So join. You give that luck to us, and we give that luck back to you. Now, Owen.
Yes, it blesses your dice.
Would you like to tell us again where you're from, where people can find you, what social medias you're on? All of the links will be in the chat anyway, but tell us.
I think, yeah. Yeah, so Lost Archives, twitch.tv/The Lost Archives. On YouTube, you can just put in @The Lost Archives D&D, or just type in The Lost Archives. If you see a Celtic not work, you've arrived at the right spot. On podcast, it's just The Lost Archives. If you type it into iTunes, Google Play, it'll pop up normally as the first result, fingers crossed. On Twitter, we're reasonably active, which is just, I think it's just The Lost Archives on Twitter as well. Oh no, it's @ArchivesLost. Almost got me there. And apart from that, I think we've got a Facebook page, but it's not super active. We don't use the Facebook very much. You can join us in the Discord. The link is, I think you can access the link just through the YouTube page. There's a Discord link. The Discord's really fun. We've got a few people in there who we chat about Avatar Legends, a few people running campaigns and asking some questions because it's a fairly new system. So we're kind of all learning it together at the same time. And we also have a really cool fan art channel in the Lost Archives Discord where some incredibly talented artists have been putting up some really cool work. So if you want to come see some really cool fan art, I'll be sharing those on the stream as well anyway, but there's some cool fan art there. No, thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome and really fun to hang out. I love this, and talking as a free action sounds really fun as well. That sounds like loads of fun.
Chaotic goodness is what it is. I'd also like to point out as well that Owen is very good at doing art as well. So go to the Discord, check out the stream as well, because all of Owen's art is on the stream as well. It's
I do. I need to get better at posting the art up on ArtStation. I was doing it very consistently for a while, but there's like a limit to uploads you can do per day, and so then I forget and don't do it. But I will try and put all the character art up. But thank you for saying. I'm pretty self-taught with art, so it's been a bit of a journey coming from like doing anatomical drawings for uni to like doing full character art. It's been loads of fun, and I'm loving it. It's so good. I love good character art.
So I've already said thank you to you for coming on. You're an amazing person. It's been brilliant having you here.
You're an amazing person.
But the only thing left to say is the thing that we always say on Fridays at Roll Together, which is always stay classy at the table. Bye, everyone. Always stay classy.
Always stay classy at the table. Always.
Bye.
See you later, guys.